The desert base was alive with the rhythm of engines. The Apache rotor blades cut the air with a low, steady thump thump thump, while mechanics shouted across the tarmac. For everyone else, it was just another scorching day. For her, it was cover. Leo adjusted her cap lower, strands of dust-coated hair falling over her cheek. She blended in perfectly, oil smudges on her hands, a wrench slung through her tool belt, and the quiet patience of someone invisible. That invisibility wasn't an accident, it was a weapon. No one noticed the way her eyes never stopped scanning. A pair of younger mechanics whispered nearby, laughing between sips of bottled water. "Man, did you hear about that ghost program?" one asked. "Yeah, right, that's just a fairy tale. Some super soldier who can slip through bases like a shadow?" "Please." Leo's hands froze for the briefest second on the helicopter panel. Ghost 7. They thought it was a fairy tale. Good. She kept working, tightening a hydraulic line with deliberate calm, masking the storm beneath her skin. The airfield sirens wailed suddenly. A convoy approached from the perimeter, armored vehicles, their matte black finish catching the sun like polished steel. The chatter stopped. Even the mechanics stood straighter. From the lead vehicle, a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform pressed crisp. His eyes scanned the hangar like a hawk. Colonel Drake. Rumors said he was the kind of man who could spot weakness a mile away and crush it without hesitation. He didn't notice, the mechanic with her head bent low. Not yet. The colonel walked past, boots striking the ground like gunfire. Leo's pulse remained steady, but her muscles coiled beneath the surface. She had been briefed months ago. If Drake ever came sniffing around this base, it meant the operation was already compromised. Hours later, under the burning dusk, a sudden commotion erupted. One of the Apaches had been tampered with. Its sensor grid scrambled, electronics flickering in unpredictable bursts. Mechanics shouted in confusion, scrambling for manuals and parts. Drake's gaze swept the crew like a blade. "Who here understands this system?" he barked. Silence. Then quietly, Leo set her wrench down. "I do." All eyes turned. She climbed into the cockpit, hands moving with surgical precision. Within minutes, the scrambled grid came alive, stabilizing under her adjustments. The cockpit lights flickered steady. The engine hummed to life. Gasps broke out among the crew. Drake narrowed his eyes. That wasn't the work of an ordinary mechanic. Colonel Drake's stare lingered on Leo far too long. His jaw tightened, his hands folded neatly behind his back. "You," he said finally. His voice was calm, but the silence it carried was heavier than any shout. "Name?" Leo wiped her, hands on a rag, careful not to betray the sudden stillness in her pulse. "Sergeant Elena Moore, sir," she replied smoothly, using the identity crafted for her cover. Drake studied her like a man inspecting a blade. "Not bad for a sergeant," he muttered. "But I've seen mechanics who couldn't rewire a field radio, let alone recalibrate a scrambled sensor grid." Leo shrugged, feigning modesty. "Spent a lot of time with broken birds, sir. They talked to you after a while." Some of the soldiers laughed nervously. Drake didn't. His eyes narrowed further. That night, Leo moved quietly through the maintenance bay long after the others had left. The base was quieter now, only the hum of generators and the occasional howl of desert wind filling the silence. She crouched under the Apache she had repaired. Hidden beneath its belly, she slid open a concealed panel, one only someone with ghost clearance would know existed. Her gloved fingers found the small transmitter embedded deep inside. Not standard issue. Definitely a tracker. Her stomach turned, cold. Someone had already infiltrated the fleet. She pocketed the device, sealed the panel, and melted back into the shadows. But she wasn't alone. Up in the watchtower, silhouetted against the starry night, Drake stood with binoculars. He wasn't looking at the base. He was looking at her. Back in her quarters, Leo locked the door and pulled a small battered radio from a false compartment in her duffel bag. She turned the dials with precision until static gave way to a faint coded pulse. Three dots, one dash, three dots. The ghost. Protocol was active. She scribbled quickly into her notebook. Tracker embedded kernel suspicious extraction window narrowing. Her mission wasn't just to hide. She was here to protect something. Buried deep under this very base was a prototype system capable of disrupting enemy communications across an entire continent. If it fell into the wrong hands, wars would be won before they even began. And now, someone knew it was here. The following evening, Drake staged a drill. Alarms blared through the night, red lights painting the hangar walls. Soldiers scrambled into formation as sirens echoed across the desert. "This is a simulated breach," Drake announced coldly. "We test readiness tonight." But Leo knew better. This wasn't a drill. It was a hunt. As soldiers secured perimeters, Drake's eyes kept darting to the mechanics. To her, Leo played along, grabbing a toolkit and running toward the grounded Blackhawk as ordered. Yet even as she worked, she felt the weight of his gaze. He wasn't watching the helicopters. He was watching for shadows that didn't belong. The night was restless. Wind carried sand across the airfield, whispering through the wires and rotor blades. The base never truly slept, but tonight its silence felt staged, like a theater set, waiting for the curtain to rise. Leo moved carefully. Through the hangar, her coveralls tied at the waist, a flashlight in her hand. To anyone watching, she was just another overworked mechanic, restless and thorough. But every step was deliberate. She knew the colonel was setting snares. Earlier that day, she'd noticed new cameras installed, angled too precisely, too deliberately, toward the hangar doors and storage lockers. She also caught soldiers moving in unusual patrol patterns, always overlapping at points where she tended to pass. Drake was tightening the net. She crouched behind a fuel drum, eyes flicking across the hangar floor. Two soldiers moved past, their boots echoing, rifles slung low, but fingers tense against the triggers. Not a casual patrol. This was bait. Leo waited, counted their steps. Then, as the wind rattled the steel roof, she slipped from her cover, moving like smoke. She reached the tool cage and unlocked it, fingers brushing past ordinary wrenches and drills until they found the small, wrapped bundle she'd hidden weeks ago. A compact transmitter jammer. She tucked it into her belt. It wasn't a weapon, but in her hands, it might as well have been. "Sergeant Moore." The voice froze her blood. She turned slowly. Colonel Drake stood just beyond the shadows, his frame backlit by the glow of a halogen lamp. "You work late," he said, his tone too calm. His eyes didn't blink. "Engines don't fix themselves," Leo replied casually, locking the tool cage again. Drake stepped closer, his boots steady, deliberate. "Strange. I ran your file today. You're skilled, yes, but too skilled. A backwater mechanic doesn't recalibrate an Apache in minutes." Leo forced a small shrug. "Maybe the others are just slow, sir." Drake smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Or maybe you're something else entirely." The silence between them stretched, a taut wire ready to snap. Drake didn't move to arrest her. Not yet. He simply nodded and walked away, his silhouette fading into the dark. Leo exhaled slowly. It wasn't relief. It was calculation. He wasn't done watching. He was tightening the leash, waiting for her to stumble, and she couldn't afford to. That night, as she moved back toward her quarters, she noticed the subtle signs of surveillance. A shadow lingering too long at the corner, the faint red blink of a camera that hadn't been there before, the silence of soldiers pretending to sleep too still. Drake had set the board. The next move was hers. At 0300 hours, the base plunged into chaos. Explosions thundered near the fuel depot, fire painting the night sky orange. Alarms screamed, soldiers scrambled, and panic rippled through the camp. Leo's instincts sharpened instantly. This wasn't Drake's doing. This was something worse. Through the firelight, she spotted black-clad figures breaching the perimeter fence. Saboteurs, heavily armed, moving with precision. They weren't here to destroy the base. They were here for the prototype buried beneath it, and somehow they knew exactly where to strike. Leo ran, not away from the fight, but into it. She slipped through the confusion, her coveralls vanishing into smoke and flame. The ghost had work to do. The desert sun scorched the base, heat shimmering over steel and sand. Soldiers moved about in routine rhythm, laughter echoing faintly through the hangars. No one paid attention to the lone mechanic crouched beside the Apache helicopter, her sleeves rolled, hands buried deep in wires. But Leo wasn't repairing, she was planting. With practiced precision, she slipped a coded marker into the targeting system, the kind invisible to ordinary diagnostics but sharp enough to reveal hidden tampering. She wiped the sweat from her brow and stood casually, as though nothing had happened. From the distance, Colonel Thorne watched her, his sharp eyes narrowing. She's not just fixing machines, he thought. She's setting a trap. The mess hall buzzed with voices, clattering trays, and the heavy smell of military rations. Leo sat in the shadows, a spoon untouched on her plate, her gaze fixed across the room. Lieutenant Reynolds tapped his fingers against the table in a nervous rhythm, sweat dampening his collar. Captain Finley checked his tablet again and again, his eyes darting toward the exit every few seconds. Leo didn't blink. She watched them like a predator in tall grass. Her thoughts were ice. There, waiting for something. Tonight I'll know what. In the command hangar, tactical screens lit up with mission data. At first all seemed normal, until an anomalous signal spiked across the board. Thorne barked. Source? A technician stammered. It's internal. Coming from Lieutenant Reynolds' console. On screen, enemy units appeared inside a blind spot that shouldn't have existed. Thorne's fist slammed the console. He created the blind spot. He's feeding them our movements. Leo stepped forward, her eyes cold, a faint smile brushing her lips. And now, he's trapped in his own game. At 0900 hours, the Apache engines thundered to life. The ground trembled as their blades shredded the desert air. Pilots strapped in, unaware that every movement was being monitored from above. Leo stood near the hangar doors, arms crossed, eyes half closed as though she were simply checking for mechanical errors. But inside she tracked every code her hidden markers sent back. Beside her, Colonel Thorne leaned close and muttered, Today the truth surfaces, Ghost 7. Leo's lips barely moved, and someone won't live to see tomorrow. In the command hangar, tactical screens lit up with mission data. At first all seemed normal, until an anomalous signal spiked across the board. Thorne barked. Source? A technician stammered. It's internal. Coming from Lieutenant Reynolds' console. On screen, enemy units appeared inside a blind spot that shouldn't have existed. Thorne's fist slammed the console. He created the blind spot. He's feeding them our movements. Leo stepped forward, her eyes cold, a faint smile brushing her lips. And now, he's trapped in his own game. The desert wind howled across the base. Reynolds walked into the comms room, sweat dripping down his brow. He didn't know Leo and Thorne were already tracking every keystroke. The instant he sent another encrypted burst, the system flagged. His console read. From the shadows, Leo whispered, He's not just leaking data, he's guiding them. Leo plugged her custom device into the comms terminal. Code scrolled like lightning. Within seconds, she rerouted Reynolds' signal back to its origin, a mobile enemy hub buried deep in the desert dunes. Thorne's jaw tightened. So that's where they're nesting. Leo's reply was colder than the desert night, and Reynolds just gave us their key. Reynolds slipped out of the comms room, convinced no one saw him. Leo followed silently, her steps ghost-like. In a dark storage hangar, Reynolds whispered to Captain Finley. They bought it. Tonight they'll send the convoy right into our hill zone. But then a voice sliced through the shadows. Convoy route or your grave? They spun. Leo stepped forward, her pistol drawn, eyes like steel. Thorne and 2 MPs stormed in. Reynolds reached for his sidearm, but Leo's gun was already pressed to his forehead. Finley froze, panic etched across his face. Thorne's roar shook the hangar. Traitors! Reynolds spat. You're fighting. The wrong war. Leo silenced him, whispering, Ghosts don't negotiate. The MPs disarmed them. For the first time, the base realized the enemy wasn't outside. It was inside their own walls. The traitors sat chained inside a reinforced cell, sweat rolling down their brows under the harsh white lights. Reynolds glared with defiance, but Finley trembled, his knees shaking. Colonel Thorne paced slowly, boots echoing on the steel floor. You've been feeding them for weeks. Where's their command post? Reynolds sneered. You'll never reach it. They're already inside your walls. The silence was broken by Leo's voice, calm and razor sharp. Everyone talks. The question is, do you want to talk on your feet or on your knees? Reynolds' smirk faltered. Leo leaned closer, her eyes locked on Finley. Her tone dropped to a whisper only he could hear. You're not built for this. You're scared. He dragged you into this, didn't he? One word, and you walk out alive. Finley's breathing hitched. He looked at Reynolds, then back at Leo. His voice cracked. They're hiding in the dunes, 30 clicks north, old mining tunnels. It's their hub. Thorne's eyes hardened, fists clenching. Finally, a location. Reynolds roared, straining against his chains. You coward. Later that night, Leo stood outside the command hangar, desert wind tugging at her uniform. The sky burned with stars, the base quiet but heavy with tension. She pulled a piece of cloth from her pocket, the insignia of Ghost 7. She wrapped it around her wrist like a ritual. The time for shadows was over. The hunt was about to begin. Thorne joined her, voice low. You know this could be a trap. Leo's gaze didn't waver. Good. Then I'll walk right into it. Convoy engines roared to life before dawn. Humvees and armored vehicles rolled out, sand kicking up under their wheels. Apache blades thundered overhead, cutting the desert silence apart. At the front sat Leo, helmet visor down, eyes steady. Every mile drew them closer to the enemy's nest. Every mile drew her closer to the ghosts she once left behind. For the first time, the soldiers around her understood. This wasn't just another mission. This was a reckoning. The convoy slowed as it neared the northern dunes. Engines hummed low, headlights dimmed. The desert stretched endlessly, silent but alive with unseen eyes. Leo scanned the horizon through her night vision scope. No movement. Too quiet. Thorne tightened his grip on the radio. That's the problem. As the vehicles crawled forward, the sand itself seemed to shift. Faint metallic glimmers poked from beneath the dunes, hidden barrels waiting to strike. Without warning, the desert erupted. RPGs streaked across the sky, slamming into the convoy. Fireballs tore into the night. Soldiers dove for cover as heavy machine gun fire rained from camouflaged bunkers. Ambush! Defensive line! Thorne roared. Leo leapt from the Humvee, rolling into the sand. Dust and flames swallowed the horizon. She spotted enemy silhouettes moving fast between the dunes, disciplined, coordinated, not raiders, but trained killers. For the first time, Ghost 7 showed its teeth. Through the chaos, Leo's visor locked on a figure standing atop a dune, silhouetted against the inferno. Cloaked in desert gear, the figure raised a hand, and the gunfire ceased instantly, like a switch had been thrown. Soldiers froze. Smoke curled in the air. The figure's voice carried across the dunes, calm and cold. It's been a long time, Ghost. Leo's heart slammed in her chest. She knew that voice. A ghost from her past was no longer dead. He was leading the enemy. The desert burned, but for Leo, the world went silent. Part 1 ended where it began, with a shadow she thought she'd buried. Soldiers screamed, vehicles burned. Leo dragged a wounded private behind cover, bullets kicking up sand around them. Thorne shouted into his radio, "Hold the line, push them back." But the enemy wasn't pushing. They were testing. Through the smoke, Leo saw his face. Major Cade Mercer. once her commander, now the leader of Ghost 7. His eyes locked on hers, calm as the battlefield burned. He raised 2 fingers. His fighters melted back into the dunes, vanishing like phantoms. At dawn, the battlefield was silent. Wounded were carried back. Black smoke spiraled into the sky. Thorn spat in the sand. He could have finished us. Why didn't he? Leo whispered the truth. Because he's not done playing yet. In the medbay, soldiers whispered Mercer's name like a curse. Leo stared at her reflection in the steel wall. Blood streaked across her face. If Mercer wants ghosts, she said coldly, then I'll give him one. Years earlier, a Black Ops mission gone wrong. Leo, younger, face streaked with ash, standing among masked operatives under Mercer's command. His words echoed, "We are shadows. We answer to no one." In memory, Leo pulled off her mask as villages burned in the distance. "This isn't justice, this is slaughter." Mercer's reply was ice. "There is no justice, only survival." Leo jolted awake in her bunk, drenched in sweat. The same insignia on her wrist burned like a scar. Ghost 7 wasn't just Mercer's creation, it was hers too. In the command tent, Thorn barked, "You brought this war to my base. If you want Mercer, fine, but I won't bleed my men for your ghosts." Leo's gaze was fire. "Then don't. I'll hunt him alone." In the blood, red dawn after the ambush, Leo's battered squad struggles to hold together as Mercer reveals his true plan inside a hidden desert fortress, forcing Leo and his soldiers into suffocating tunnels where ambushes, betrayals, and brutal hand-to-hand battles erupt until Leo finally confronts Mercer in a vast underground chamber filled with stolen weapons. Their duel shaking the very walls, and as explosions consume the fortress, Leo claws his way into the rising sun, scarred, victorious, and forever haunted by the cost of survival.